What is going on this morning, everybody? Welcome to Dylan Talks Tone. Today we're going to have some fun. If you think this kind of stuff is fun, I think it's fun. We're going to talk about 5 stupid pickup myths that I think have kind of shaped the folklore that actually isn't folklore of pickup building. And let's just kind of squash some of these, right? And try to establish a little more pragmatic way of making decisions about what we buy for our guitars. It'll just make everything easier. Now, I know that what I'm about to say is going to ruffle some feathers. If you do not agree with me, that's okay. Put it in the comments and let me know what you think. However, the things that I'm about to tell you are based on science and math. Because physics is what makes a guitar pickup work, not voodoo and strongly held beliefs about vintage lore and all that kind of stuff. So, be cool, but let's get into this. Number 1, the myth that the original PAF cannot be duplicated. This is an interesting one because in certain respects, it cannot. The wire that was used back then, plain enamel wire, had some components in it that are no longer manufactured because, believe it or not, it gives you cancer. Apparently everything gives you cancer, especially in California. The little sticker tells you so. And so they don't make the chemical that goes on the outside of that wire anymore the same way. Copper has also not necessarily evolved, but I guess progressed a little bit in how it's made. Efficiencies in manufacturing more than the actual formulation of the copper itself. But overall, the stuff is still the same. The key things that people argue in vintage pickups are whine counts, which they didn't really count. I don't know if you know this or not, but the old Gibson machines didn't actually have counters. They just wound them until the bobbins were full. So it's in certain respects, you cannot duplicate the PAF because you don't know exactly how many whines are in it. You can't get the wire anymore, etc. But we don't use butyrate bobbins anymore. We use ABS now. We don't use maple spacers anymore. We use ABS now because all those things, ABS did not exist in the same form and at the consumer level that it did back then that it does now. So in those respects, maybe the myth is partly true that you cannot duplicate the actual pickup. However, you can duplicate the tone of that pickup because the science behind what makes the pickup actually work has not changed and we can still get there. So when we look at the diameter of the wire, 42 gauge, we look at the thickness and the capacitance of the insulation, all those things can be duplicated with science, and they have. Polynylon wire in a single build now, which is what we use here, can get you the same tone. You don't have to have that old school coating on the wire, the plain enamel wire. It's all about the thickness of it, and it's all about the behavior of that particular insulation on that wire that can be duplicated. It's not a problem. Totally cool, absolutely doable. When it comes to butyrate versus ABS, no effect on tone whatsoever. Well, the only thing that really affects tone is the measurement here. So this measurement from top to bottom, the length of the bobbin here and here, and then of course magnet quality. Magnet quality is a big variable, but you can engineer to it and you can get there. Okay, so whine counts being as close as we can get, 5,000, 5,100, etc. Something like that. Those things, you can get there. So the tone of the pickup, no problem. Our Dylan Pickups DAF that we make sounds fantastic in comparison to an actual 59 PAF. I mean, we've done side-by-side comparisons with them before. lots of times. It's not a problem, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of other good pickup builders out there that have done the same thing. There's no real like voodoo around those pickups. There's no magic. It's just a matter of physics and applying the technology that we have now, which actually can be done better, more accurately, and more easily duplicated, and more accurately duplicated from pickup to pickup, more consistent across the product line than they could back then. So it's actually better than the original ones. So there's no real magic surrounding those original PAFs. Number 2, vintage materials are better than modern materials, or you can't get the same tone with modern materials. We touched on this a little bit with the PAF thing. However, it kind of goes further than that, right? So we've got cloth covered wire here. We've got 4 conductor wire here for a splittable humbucker. We've got the old braided covered wire here, for example. And then we discussed the butyrate versus ABS. We discussed the plastic spacer. Now there are some materials that can really matter when it comes to this kind of stuff. So when we start talking about magnet quality, that's a big deal. But the thing is that doesn't necessarily mean old versus new. It really means the quality of the manufacturing, the consistency of the manufacturing, and the method that you use to magnetize it. Can you consistently do that? We have a magnetizer over here that we can consistently magnetize pickups the same way every time across our entire product line. It's like $1,000 for this thing, but it's the way to do it. And so doing it right is doing it right, and doing it consistently is doing it consistently. Consistency is key over any of this other stuff. So when we look at some of this wire, for example, cloth wire has no tonal advantage over, PVC coated wire. The only reason these wires were in existence and this one was not is simply that. PVC coating did not really come into use in civilian use until the late 50s, early 60s. It was military only at that point for submarines and Navy and ships and stuff. ABS hadn't really made its way into homes. That's why we had old houses with cloth wiring in the walls, right? So really, they were just repurposing other types of wire that were available. There was no tonal, advantage to using any of that stuff. Now, I've heard many people say, well, when you coil split and then the wire is down here and the coil split's down here and it's got to go back up, and it's absolutely a bunch of baloney. It's not measurable. The difference is not measurable. It's things that people make up in their heads, and it's totally cool. So use whatever you want. I love the vintage style wiring for ease of use because, for example, now cheap wire doesn't do this, but the quality of wire that we use does, the Gavit wire, it's pre-tinned. So when you move it, it does what you want it to. So when you route it around in the guitar, it looks really nice. So I really like it. Of course, you can't, coil split a humbucker with this wire on it. So that's why we have the 4-wire available. So, it's all about options. So choosing options for what you want to use the guitar for is more important and going to get you better tone than worrying about what the material is made out of. Number 3, this is a big one. Ceramic magnets are not as good as Alnico magnets. This is a thing that has become a thing probably since the mid-80s when Squier guitars, Fender specifically, started putting ceramic magnets into their less expensive guitars. The reason for that is this humbucker magnet in Alnico versus this humbucker magnet in ceramic. This is about 4 to 5 times the price. So they then got associated with cheap guitars because what they were doing was they were using a very strong magnet to make up for other cheap materials and other design shortcuts, I guess we could say, to save money. And it made a cheaper pickup. And so therefore, people thought that ceramic magnets sound cheap. There are very good ceramic magnet pickups. If you want, we can do a video where we take the same pickup and we'll put an Alnico magnet in it and we'll put a ceramic magnet in it. We'll just take the same exact one and we'll swap them out in a guitar. Maybe we'll do that video because I think it would be very important for people to understand that the strength of the magnet and the shape of the magnetic field is a part of the design of the pickup. Therefore, you can design the pickup around that. A good example of this would be DiMarzio's Super Distortion. Another example of this would be obviously our Super 8, our Super 8 pickup. What's a better example? How about our center punch pickup and our 8-ball pickup? Very similar wind characteristics in those pickups, just one has an Alnico 5 and one has a ceramic magnet in it. Very warm, very strong, great signal, not brittle whatsoever when designed properly. Seymour Duncan JB is another example. There's very legendary pickups that are not cheap pickups that have ceramic in them. It's all about understanding when you're on the design side of that pickup, how to put those aspects together. Coil height, coil length, wire diameter, wire insulation thickness, wind count, magnet strength, magnet dimension, all together to come up with a design. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the pickup is cheaper or sounds cheaper or is not as good. If you take all of those things that are important, put them together and design around that magnet, or design with that magnet in mind is probably more accurate. The few examples that we mentioned, I'll leave links to some of our stuff that we use, ceramic magnets, and they sound freaking amazing. And maybe if you want, let me know in the comments. We'll do that video where we do a direct comparison. What we could do is we could take 2 coils that we've wound and not even change them. Just take the magnet out and replace the magnet. So the only change you hear is that magnet. Now we've done this video with Alnico magnets, but we've not done it with ceramic. So maybe we'll do that. Okay, let's take this magnet thing a little further in our number 4. People will often, and number 4 and 5 are going to be very similar in the fact that people misunderstand magnet and pickup specifications. So number 4, I want to talk about the strength of magnets. There is a common misunderstanding in myth that an Alnico 8 pickup is hotter than an Alnico 5 pickup, is hotter than an Alnico 3 pickup, 2, etc. Etc. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mispronounce that. This is a big misconception. As we discussed, the height of the coil, the length of the coil, the gauge of the wire, the strength of the magnet, dimension of the magnet, distance of the magnet, all that stuff, all matters. It is a design ethos that goes through the entire pickup, and changing one thing can change a thing, but that's not how you design a pickup. You take all of those aspects together to design a pickup. Now, let's talk specifically about the science of Alnico magnets and understand them specifically. Alnico magnets are aluminum, nickel, cobalt. There's also some copper in there, and there's also some titanium. So when we go Alnico 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Now we don't use all of those commonly in guitar pickups, but the proportions of aluminum, nickel, cobalt, copper, and titanium all change around a little bit to give us different strengths, okay? And when the pickup is made, they're made a couple of different ways, sintered, cast, there's a couple of different ways to do it. But the long and the short of it is we get different strength potentials, not strengths, but strength potentials. So, so it goes in this order of strength, okay? Alnico 1, which we don't typically use, alnico 3 is the weakest. Alnico 2 is then the next, then 5, then 8, and then ceramic is above that. So in our pickups right now, we use alnico 2s in our Thruxtons, we use alnico 5s in our center punches, in our DAFs, we use alnico 8s in our Super 8s, and we use ceramics in our 8 balls. So it goes kind of out of order. So just remember that. 3, 2, 5, 8. Okay? Now, does this mean that this is how hot a pickup is? No, because we also have to think about the coil dimension, how much wire is there, the wind count, the thickness of the thickness of the wire, the gauge of the wire, 42, 43, etc. All those other things matter. So it's not this, we can still have a very low output pickup with an alnico 8. But what that does is it just changes the pick attack, it changes the, it changes the resonant peak of the pickup, so it will sound different. But it's a whole bunch of factors that are put together, not just the strength. Let's talk about a couple of other little sub-myths here. I'll give you a couple of little honorable mention and bonuses under the magnet thing. Magnet degaussing is what a lot of people call it, but it's actually called phase decomposition. People think that over time an alnico magnet demagnetizes. There's been a lot of studies done on this by nerdy people in white suits that are a lot smarter than guitar players and a lot smarter than the famous pickup builders that you think you know. Actually, folks with white coats and pocket protectors and degrees and people that are actually smart about this stuff. They've done a lot of studies about this stuff, and the most decay that happens in the magnetism of the magnemotive force of a pickup is right after you magnetize it. So if I take an unmagnetized alnico 5 bar and I go over to the machine and I hit the button and I magnetize it, in the first couple hours after that is when the most phase decomposition happens. For the following 100 years, it loses about 1 to 2% of its strength, given it is not exposed to extreme shock. So if you were to take this alnico 8 magnet, right, this is a 2, and drop it on a concrete floor, probably it would shatter. But if it didn't shatter, you could harm the magnetism of the magnet by extreme shock. Now, we're not talking about dropping a guitar. We're talking about it actually shocking against a hard surface. But typically it will shatter before it will do that in these applications. So magnet decay over a long period of time is completely a made-up thing. It's totally a made-up thing. The misconception that old pickups have less magnetism now than they did 50 years ago probably has more to do with the way pickups were magnetized in the past versus how they are now. And magnet composition has changed a little bit too. But they don't just demagnetize over time. They do, but a percentage that you and I in a guitar aren't really going to hear. The other thing that can affect this is exposing them to heat. Typically, the heat that you want to keep an alnico magnet under is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which you could get close to approaching with a soldering iron. You know, I solder at 800, so you could get very close. Let's see, that would be 538 degrees Celsius for you metric folks. So you could damage a pickup with extreme heat, or exposing it to outside magnetism that messes with it. Okay, now leaning it against your amp is not going to do it. There's physics behind that. If you want me to explain that further, I sure can. Number 5. This is probably the biggest one, and that is that the DC resistance of a pickup is the indicator of its output. Now, first of all, let's say that it can be an indicator of output. However, these two Strat pickups have exactly the same DC resistance, but they will have different outputs. Why? Magnet output, Alnico 2, Alnico 5. These two humbucker bobbins have exactly the same DC resistance, but they will have different outputs. Why? Different wire gauges. What is the point we're trying to make here? DC resistance is only a measure of output when all other factors in the pickup are exactly the same. Same magnet, same coil dimensions, same wire type, same insulation thickness, so single build, double build, are all the same. That's the only time the output of a pickup can be determined by the DC resistance of the wire. Because a thinner wire has a higher DC resistance per foot than a thicker wire. So 43 has a higher DC resistance per foot than 42. Therefore, we could make it, the numbers look the same on paper, and those pickups would sound wildly different. So, what you have to do is you have to take into consideration what all the things that we talked about. And this is why this is really important to zoom out on all of this stuff. Not focus on one particular aspect of anything in the guitar, really. Because we can affect all this stuff with pot choice and cap choice, right? Like we can affect all this stuff even outside the pickup itself. So we have to look at everything. We have to look at the dimension of the coil, the diameter of the wire, the thickness of the insulation type, the wind count, the size of the magnet, diameter of the magnet, which also affects the coil dimension, like in a Strat, for example, going from 187 to 195 magnets. Let's see, what else we got? The strength of the magnet, the type of the magnet, the dimensions of the magnet, all those things is a design package, okay? So, and I think this is the thing that I hope that you get from this conversation today, is that each aspect of so here's one of the things that comes up in our chats, on our website, Q&As, things like this. I want you to make this pickup for me with, do you make these in Alnico 2 because I like Alnico 2s? If I switch the magnet, I have to completely redesign the pickup. If you just change a magnet, it doesn't just give you a sound that you want. All aspects of this thing are collective to making this sound that you want. By putting that resonant peak in the place that you want it to be and affecting the Q, which is the width of that resonant peak of that pickup, are all aspects of each other, and they all pull on each other. Everything is a variable that moves everything around. So if you call me and say, I want a hotter pickup, what does that actually mean? Well, it means that I'm playing with my buddy and he can't hear me. Well, you don't want a hotter pickup, actually. You want a lower output pickup so you get a stronger mid-range with blah, blah, blah. Like, you could talk all these aspects out and really understand how your tone works. And that's why I think these videos are important. If you want me to do, I really want to do this video with ceramic versus Alnico, because we've not done that video before, so maybe I should do that. Let me know in the comments if that's something you want to do. If you have specific questions about any of this stuff, please do me a favor and put it in the comments. Like I said, if I have awoken a beast in you that makes you disagree with anything that I've said today, go ahead and Google it yourself. This is all very scientific stuff, studied and defined and measured by people a lot smarter than me and a lot smarter than you, unless you are one of those people that did that. I don't know who's watching. Maybe one of you engineers out there is watching this stuff that has done all these studies. But the bottom line is, even the smartest pickup builder out there, he's going to market some BS just to sell some pickups. That's why we don't like to do that. It's like we like to zoom out, just be like, look, man, this is how this junk works. And No matter whether my pickups are clear bobbins, ABS bobbins, cloth wire, plastic wire. That's why we call Dylan Talks Tone the new vintage, because I know we can get there with modern materials, modern methods, because the science is still the same. Thanks for hanging out. Do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button and the like button if you like this nerdy guitar stuff. I know you do, because you guys keep wanting me to make these nerdy videos. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you in the next one.